Hello, my name is Aminatta Mbow. I am the creative editor-in-chief for the Georgia Media Group. I am also the head of the diversity board for the organization. In this video, we had a group of students discuss the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically on how the recent killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and many other Black Americans has impacted the movement, Georgia Southern's response to it, and how we as a society can enact change. So I guess the first question that I have for you guys about, the recent killings and also the Black Lives Matter movement is, how do you think it has impacted you personally?
I've grown up my whole life in the Black community, as well as most of my family members are Black. So of course they've all given me the talk of giving me that talk that we all get every now and then of there will be people that who will not like you due to your skin color or will discriminate against you because you are an African American man. And on the other half, on another half too, I am in the LGBT community. So even though I didn't receive a talk about being discriminated in that, I still knew there was going to be discrimination and hatred from that as well. And so this has impacted me personally because, especially starting even as far back with Trayvon Martin, just every time a killing happens or when something like this happens or arises, it always puts in a fear in me that and it kind of gives all the it gives a lot of us a reminder. Oh yeah, we forget sometimes being Black is a bad thing in America half the time. We don't remember. Sometimes we're so used and we're so happy in our lives that we sometimes don't remember that, oh yeah, I could still get killed because of my skin color. I could still be killed because of this defining trait of mine. And so it's impacted me a lot because I just every killing or at least like every newscast over it, it just, oh yeah, when I go out in public, people see this Black boy. They don't see anybody else. They don't see me for like who I am or what I am. They just see this Black boy walking around. So, and it's just, I mean, the movement has been amazing though. I've enjoyed seeing how so many people come together for one cause, other countries that I wouldn't even expect to come around for one cause. And I mean, it makes me so grateful that everybody is fighting and everybody is willing to come together just so a person like me, who is an African American about to graduate next fall, can go out in the world and look for a job and not be discriminated or paid differently because of my skin color. And so I can have a future, and they're all fighting for that. And I'm really humbled and grateful that they are doing that.
The Black Lives Matter movement has impacted me because it made me wake up. I had an awakening to the fact that I was naive. I was completely naive and surrounded in my own little circle of thoughts and my own little society, and I wasn't really aware of the impact that my less fortunate peers were going through. So from the Trayvon Martin murder that really sparked the entire movement, it just made me realize that there is still work that has to be done. And then it also made me realize that the timeline between slavery, segregation, and the civil rights movement is right behind us. It is not a large gap. And that's another thing that really woke me up, was that it has only been 40, 50 years since segregation was illegal, unconstitutional. So it just puts into perspective how much work that actually has to be done, that actually needs to be started, because it's kind of like our timeline in history just hops from slavery, segregation, civil rights, and now we're at the present. But there was never a reconciliation period, a reparations period, a moment where we as Americans acknowledged our history from 50 years ago and said, hey, this is not something that we stand for anymore. So I think it just really impacted me a lot in the ways that I had to wake up myself and realize that the things that I'm fighting for and my ancestors were fighting for was not 100 years ago, more like my grandma, your grandma, the people literally in your community. So that's my take.
Why do you think the killing of George Floyd sparked the movement yet again to the point it is today?
At first, I was really shocked that it was the George Floyd killing that prompted the protest because in my personal opinion, I felt like, okay, first of all, two horrific murders. Not trying to compare one to the other and say which one was worse, because at the end of the day, it was disgusting. But I just felt like the Ahmaud Arbery was a much more personal attack on our community, because not only were these two individuals ex-cop members, they hunted him down as he was jogging freely in his neighborhood. That is the thing that is sparking my outrage. They saw him as a black male, as a threat to them, said, "Oh, he fits this description of the robbery. I'm an ex-cop, so let me use my citizen's arrest and hunt him down and not only shoot him in the stomach once, but shoot him twice and watch him die and not be convicted until the rising of the video." But to answer the question, I feel like at that point, George Floyd killing, it was enough. He was literally the symbolism between the parallels between Colin Kaepernick kneeling against the national anthem and him kneeling on the neck of George Floyd really just showed the parallel in America's history and what we've really built this country off of. So I think it more so sparked not only an outrage, but like a sense of it's time for us to start holding the people in power accountable for their actions.
Yeah, I definitely agree. By the time, like I said, because Ahmaud Arbery happened a little bit before, but right when it happened with George Floyd, at that point, everybody had just had enough. There was nothing else we could, there was nothing more heinous than two African American men dying by the hands of police, ex-cops, or anything else. There was nothing else just more heinous and more evil. And but after that, it was just I mean, like I said, if we were, I mean, a lot of people were like, if we either hunted down like Ahmaud Arbery was, or even then, like if in case something happens and a cop pulls us over, and next thing I know, kneels on our neck like George Floyd, or even comes in our house unwarranted like Breonna Taylor, if they can do that, then we're safe nowhere. We don't know, we can't live anywhere if the police have the authority, they can do that. And of course they keep going unnoticed, unwarranted, um not punished, not taking the consequences of their actions. They can, if they can do that, then we aren't safe anywhere, and we have had enough. And we just need to take a stand against it and let them know I mean, we didn't even allow it in the first place, but you guys put in certain laws in the system to let them somewhat get away with it or let them slide by, and we're done. We're tired of it. And it's just such an outrage that, especially with the Ahmaud Arbery video, it was February, so it took 2 to 3 months for that video to surface. And then right as it happened, everybody was like, wow, this really is an outrage. But yet I mean, it is just such an outrage, but yet like I said, we have had enough of it. We're tired of it all. I mean, we're tired of the killings, the senseless beatings. We're tired of all of it.
Do you feel like since this whole movement has happened, we've seen protests happen in this country, in every single state, along with so many different countries around the world. Do you think protesting is an effective tactic to get change in the world when it comes to police brutality? Police brutality.
I believe that protesting is a great way to bring media's attention, to stir up, um, stir up basically everybody's comfortability with how they are right now. So I think protesting is a great tactic to bring more attention and awareness to what the Black Lives Matter movement encompasses and what we're fighting for. But at the end of the day, the most useful tactic that we will ever have was what this country was supposedly built off of, our democracy. So by voting, I feel like that is the only way that you make a change in the system. The Black Lives Matter movement is not just about making sure that the killers for Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery go to jail in prison. It's to systematically change the structure of the government, because all problems, everything that occurs is rooted in the way that our system was built. So by going to the polls, we are getting to the root to kill the tree now. We're killing the tree by the roots by voting the people who are in these positions of power, like your sheriff, your mayor, your governor, your Georgia Senate. We are making sure that we are picking politicians who represent our best interests and what our community needs. So protesting is a great tactic, but voting at the polls is the number one.
One other thing, once again, I agree so wholeheartedly because I mean, protesting is definitely a way to show that we are here and we won't stand for this anymore. But voting and changing the laws that were once put in place to put us down is definitely a way to go. Because I mean, it's definitely a way of showing. It's definitely a way of showing. Oh, they're really you're really trying to change the system. You're not trying to change just the people that were affected by it or the people that set the movement on. You're trying to change the whole system so you don't have to this problem doesn't keep reoccurring and only the people that it impacts get arrested, but you're trying to change the whole movement so that way nobody is so that way nobody is impact that way nobody has a um oh goodness nobody no everybody is doing the same and it's not just this person they're all like because these incidents happen to them they're affected as a whole we're all affected by the same laws and the same democracy that we all do and I mean honestly it's the same thing if you don't vote then why are you upset that these people did what they did? You didn't vote for the opposite, or you didn't think this was going to happen because you didn't want to vote. Voting is one of the most important things you can do. And just like Kenzie said, we're taking the root, we're taking it at the root. So it's not exactly, and so I mean, we are making a change by cutting the root of the tree.
Do you think it's enough for people to just retweet? Do you think it's enough for people to just post a black square? Like, what, what social responsibility do people have to talk more about Black Lives Matter, especially people of celebrities or different white people and stuff like that? Like, what responsibility do they have to do more than just retweet, post a black square and stuff like that?
So my perspective on this, honestly, is that to me, it's not full blown out racism because full blown out racist, you can see them, right? They're loud, they're vocal, they obviously like they are in the media and in the public, and you can actually see their opinions and their lifestyle and what they believe in. I think that the most damaging part of systematic racism is the unconscious bias, the thoughts that and that has a big effect, especially on police officers, especially on anyone, any lawmakers, anything with criminal justice. Like unconscious bias has so much to do with discrimination against Black people. Because how can you screen someone for prejudiced ideas or prejudiced thoughts that they have, or like about a certain community or certain people? And so I think if you're going to combat I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough that you post a black square on your Instagram. I mean, who cares? Honest to God, if you're just going to post a black square on your Instagram and then do nothing else but post that to say you care, because you think people are going to attack you if you don't, then we don't need you in the movement. No one, like, it just doesn't matter. And I don't think retweeting anything is going to stop anything either. I think that you have to be vocal, and you have to use your privilege to check yourself. Like, you have to be able to talk about what's uncomfortable, and what's uncomfortable is being like, you may have pre-existing thoughts about certain communities that you use in your everyday life. Like, maybe you thought about, maybe you were walking down the street and you saw someone come towards you and you were like, oh well, they're a person of color, and A, B, and C pop in your head. You have to be able to check that, understand why you thought that, and then be able to reenact in a different way, or act in a different way. And I think that the way we're going to combat systematic racism is just teaching people about these unconscious biases, and teaching people how to be aware of their thoughts, and how to be aware of, even if you do have these thoughts about certain communities, what are you doing to fix that? Like, you having these thoughts and then not acting on them, or not actively trying to change them, isn't going to help anybody. And so it starts with personal realizing that you may have these thoughts, and it's okay to have, pre-existing thoughts about certain communities. It's just what you do next. It's your actions that you take. And we're going to need to be able to somehow teach everyone about, the way, about how to counteract those actions, how to counteract those thoughts. And I really don't think anything is going to change unless we teach people about that. Because, like I said, like, you can see racists are loud. Like, they want you to know that they're racist, and they're easy to spot out in the crowds. They're easy to spot out in these KKK rallies. They're easy to look at and find, pinpoint, and be like, yeah, he's definitely racist. But what's harming our community so much more is the silence and the thoughts of, our certain community that people aren't talking about. People have these thoughts and they're not doing anything about them. So, I don't think it's enough to post a black square. I don't think it's enough to just retweet stuff. I think you have to start with yourself and then educate other people about, about unconscious biases.
I think that the main difference is being active or passive. So I do believe that, posting on social media is a great way for people to get informed, but it's also a passive act unless you have some type of action step that is following what you're posting. So I'll post this photo, I'll post supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, but what comes after needs to be petitions that I'm signing that you can find in my link in my bio. What needs to come after are videos and ways that you can talk to your parents about these uncomfortable conversations that you need to have. So if you're being active while posting on social media, I feel like that is great, but I feel like where we suffer, too many people are being passive in the act that just posting on social media is giving them a pat on the back or making them feel like they're contributing to the movement when really a retweet or a post isn't gonna do anything.
Counteract that, what I feel like, because you're right. And I feel like, honestly, nowadays, companies and people are only doing this so they don't get their ass chewed out. Like, honest to God, like, these giant companies that are posting Black Lives Matter, like, they're not doing it because they think that it's like, they're not doing it to be behind the movement. They're doing it because they don't want to get socially shamed.
Exactly.
And so you have to realize, like, and some of these celebrities are doing the same thing. Like, a lot of these people are just posting it because they're like, okay, if I just post this picture, they'll leave me alone. I won't get called a racist. I won't get called a homophobe, and I can stand with the movement. And, you are right. Like, passively, like, a lot of people are doing that, and that's people think it's a scapegoat now. And, it's kind of hard to call somebody out on that because you're like, are you just posting this because you think people are going to chew you out if you don't? Are you just posting this because you feel like it's the right thing to do and you're not doing anything else? Like, I do think that's pretty right.
And when something like that is trending, or when something like that is trending, or it's just like it is a big movement that creates change, everybody, like I said, a lot of celebrities, they don't want to. I think, like I said, it's so, especially in this day and age, cancel culture is so big and it's so easy, so they just don't want to. They don't want to be affected by it, or they don't want to be the next person that's canceled. So they're just like, well, let me hop on this and let me do this real quick, so that way my fans can see that I do the thing, that I somewhat care about this, and that way they can still come see my movies or do this and do that. And it's not exactly like, well, But at the same time, you'll see a lot more smaller creators, more people who are like in the art community or this and that of smaller creators. You'll see them saying we support, here are petitions, here are videos, here are this and that, like doing everything they can to support the movement, while some people just post like one black square. They'll just retweet a thing saying supporting Black Lives Matter movement, and then of course they'll have a small caption at the bottom, saying, well, it's just wrong, we can't do this anymore, we can't live like this. And it's just like, okay, have you actually talked to somebody about it though? If you have a personal black friend that's doing this, have you actually talked to them about their experience? Have you actually met with other black people? Chances are, if you are a celebrity, maybe or not, you might have an African American fan, or at least a fan that might be a person of color. So talk to them, or listen to the experiences of them, or listen to other experiences and watch videos and educate yourself, and then you'll see why this movement is so big. You'll see why a movement is so big, and maybe it might change the support. But I mean, yes, retweeting and reposting might be raising awareness and doing well, but like Kenzie said, we have to follow it with more. They can't just post it and then think, okay, that kind of gets me out of that shame bubble that everybody wants to put me in. So yeah.
So, since obviously we said earlier that you can't go anywhere without seeing the Black Lives Matter posts and everything. And recently it's kind of died down on like Twitter and Instagram and things like that. So do you think that this was mainly just a trending for that moment, or do you think this is a new beginning for Black Americans after everything that has happened?
I definitely think that it will probably die down, just because it's just the way a lot of things go, especially keeping trends just aren't as strong to keep 2 or 3 weeks down the road. I do think that Black people can turn this into a revolutionary moment. Like, I do think that this was very eye opening to our entire community and to a lot of people that, we're not just going to sit by and let this happen. And there has to be some type of change. But honest to God, like 3 months down the road, there's going to be another shooting, right? And it's going to be like, what do we do then? At that point, like, do we go back to the protest? Do we go back to the demands? How long can we protest until something is done? And if voting isn't working, if going out and protesting isn't working, then what is going to be the next step? Because it has to first of all, it has to start with laws, with our criminal justice system. And it's like, how do we implement that change? And you have to infiltrate. Honestly, like, the way you change it is infiltrating it and changing it from the top down. And at that point, it's going to be like, well, the next shooting is coming up, and we know it's going to happen sooner or later. So what are we going to do then? What are we going to protest about then? Like, who do we contact? How many petitions do we sign? Who do we need to have town halls with that is going to actually implement change? Because honestly, God, these politicians have done nothing. They've done nothing but sit there and patronize half of the Black community, and they just sit there and be like, oh yeah, we hear you, we're with you, we stand with you, and then do nothing for the
They'll
next.
sweep it.
Yeah, all they care about is your vote and the money and getting reelected. And once people realize that government is utterly useless and has done nothing to protect our people and protect its own people, like, its only purpose is to protect life, liberty, and property, and somehow it still fails to do that. Somehow it has failed this time and time again, and somehow we still believe that these Democratic or Republican, whatever party, we somehow believe that they're going to change our society, and that's just not the way it goes. Like, it has to start with us, and we have to figure out what it is that's going to change, because obviously politicians aren't working. Obviously, us voting for them isn't working because we're still getting killed out in the streets. Obviously, like, it's just going to be a different type of interpersonal societal change, more so than law changing, I guess.
There has to be something, or at least just like there has to be something more than just going to the polls, voting for certain people who say they will make the change. There has to, like Kenzie said earlier, there has to be a law. There has to be a certain amount of laws that are just that make like cops, officers, law enforcement that make them so afraid of it makes them so afraid of the consequences if they do this, or if it makes them so afraid of doing something that they won't do it. Because obviously they had a choice when they wanted to do these things. He sat there for 8 minutes and 46 seconds kneeling on George Floyd's neck. He could have made the choice to get up at any time. George Floyd was already on the ground. He could have made the choice to get up. He could have made the choice not to do anything. The other officer still could have made the choice to push him out the way and pull George up. But they didn't make that. But if they don't make that conscious choice, then there needs to be something that scares them so much that they don't want to do it. And it's just there needs to be a consequence that needs to happen. And it's just, we can't, and like I said, even though it is trending, we cannot let it, even though it's not trending anymore, or it's not like in the sphere, we cannot just let it die down, because I mean, like Alex said, the same thing will just die, it'll happen again. And once it happens, then we'll do the same thing, and it'll just be the same cycle over and over and over again, and no change will come about. It'll be the same process, and we can protest and we can do this, but it'll be the same thing unless we have something that just changes right now.
Well, personally, I kind of have to disagree. Well, not kind of. I do disagree with you guys, because voting is essential. Voting is how anything will ever change. Voting is how our democracy was set up. So I believe that, yes, it's going, the protests, all the Black Lives Matter movement, our spark that we have right now, the passion right now, it's going to die down. But I feel like the only reason it dies down is because people are too focused on instant gratification. And radical change does not call for instant gratification. Imagine if during the civil rights movement, we boycotted once and we said, oh, nothing changed. They didn't give us our rights to vote, and now we're just going to quit. We had tunnel vision. We know what the end goal was. And I feel like that's the type of energy that we have to have during this movement. We can't want things to change overnight, because nothing changes overnight. Plants don't grow overnight. You can't go to the gym and get muscles overnight. You can't study for one test overnight, at least not in college, and just get it like a whim. So we have to understand that you have to stay focused on our long-term goal, which is to systematically change. And systematic change comes, guess what? Every 2 years and every 4 years. You better vote for your local sheriff. Go out and keep the same energy we had during these George Floyd protests, and go to the polls and protest. You need to protest for your Georgia Senate every 2 years. Senate every 6 years. Sorry, you need to vote for your House of Representatives every 2 years. You need to vote for your mayor, your governor. You need to vote for the people who have the political power to implement the laws in active the active laws that we need in place in order for our movement to actually mean something. But we have to have that tunnel vision to keep the momentum going, so that way when it's time to vote, we know what we're voting for. We know why we're waiting in these 4-hour-long lines, because we want to get it at the root of the cause. So I just think that we have to keep the passion that we have going, but you have to put your passion in the right places. Don't wear yourself out protesting on the street, and then you're too tired to go out and vote for your local sheriff, who puts the laws in place and who's able to actually have those officers have some sort of repercussion on them. So I just feel like voting will always be the way to go, and you have to keep the same passion at the polls that you do in the streets. And that's just that on that.
Right, and like honestly, like I agree with the voting part, and it's like, well, let's think about it this way: we can defund the police, right? Like we can make laws to defund the police, to demilitarize them, because one, police don't need AK-47s, they don't need giant riot shields, don't need tear gas. We can make all these things happen. At the same time, well, to me, it's just like voting makes sense, and it's obviously going to inflict change. But at what point do you stop relying on your politicians to make change in that society can fix itself? Because in all reality, yes, government just wants your vote. They just want your money. They just want, to. They're gonna say a lot of things to make sure that you put the right thing, and maybe some politicians do really have their people's vote and their people's opinions in mind. But to me, I honestly think politicians should only be in office for a year or however long their term is, and that should be it. And they get whatever they need to get done, and then they vote on it, and then they get out, and then it's the next person, and so on, so on, so on. So we don't have these lifelong politicians that just sit in office and do nothing but talk and rant about being with us and standing with us, and then doing nothing over time. Um, but I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
Well, I kind of understand what you're saying, that like politicians, they just talk so much, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. They just talk so much about what they're gonna do and all this stuff to get into office. But when they get into office, we don't see the change. But guys, I also think another issue here, a bigger issue at hand, is that I'm pretty sure 95% of Americans do not know how the United States government works. I'm pretty sure people actually do not know how hard it is to get a law passed. Like, I'm in American government right now, so like all this stuff, I'm just like really learning that it takes a lot of time and effort to really get legislation pushed and passed in Congress and just in general. And it's even harder to do it when our houses are divided right now. So, like, I think we all just need to become more educated on our actual political system, because you can't work the system unless you know how to use it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that makes sense. I mean, government was made so that things take time, because the worst time to make law, to make policy, is when everyone's angry like today. Honestly, it's a bad way to make policy, is when everyone is upset and emotions are high, and it does take time. It does take time to pass laws, and so you are right. And it's just more. I just more so have a distrust of government, is what I should probably say, because honestly, like from time and time again, government has just, to me, has failed us in a lot of ways. And to me, change starts with society. Like, if you really want society to change, like, it has to be societal, interpersonal
yeah,
change that we need to fix.
yeah,
And once we change that interpersonal society fix, then that overplays into our government, because
exactly.
you've changed within our society. And so once American people realize that the government is utterly useless and really has done nothing for you, and I mean, yeah, you can still have freedoms and still have rights, and the government still play little to no part in your life, right? Like today, transgender and LGBT rights had been, I don't know how to say it.
Dismantled. They're
Right,
gone.
Yeah.
right. They've been
Literally
protected under the
took
credit, which
their
is
healthcare
which is
away. That
amazing, which is really amazing and really awesome, and really a step forward into protecting Black trans lives, into protecting Black LGBT people. Like, that is amazing, and it took time. It took a lot of time for that to pass through, and so we can still have these rights that are protected underneath our Constitution, which is important, and that can also play. I don't know how to say this, but there's a difference between the government protecting your rights and then the government being in your life and not doing anything to help you.
being
And
active or passive.
right.
Yeah,
So I honestly think the government is better as passive than it is active. And in order for the government to be effective and be passive and effective by passing laws, like, you can still passively pass laws and still be effective. And I believe that does start with our interpersonal societal change, and then that runs over into our government, if that makes sense.
yeah, because your opinion shape what you believe, and your thoughts and your opinions and everything else shapes your thought process and your political process. So when you go to the polls and you're voting, like, everything that you believe in society affects who you vote for and how you vote. So if
Right.
you believe in that police should have more rights, and that nothing's wrong with the Black community, and businesses should get more tax breaks and all that other big stuff, then of course society isn't really going to shift towards the majority side.
Right. Right. And I also think, to go back to the police officer standpoint, I think people fail to realize that, like, officers really, honest to God, have no, like, they are the basis of the problem. Like, they are only there to interact laws, to enact laws, to enforce laws, because you only follow laws for two reasons. I mean, one, because you think they're good, you think they're moral, you think they're right, and two, because someone is forcing you to follow those laws, right? And how does government get you to follow those laws? It's police. And so I think we need to direct our anger, be mad at the police, because honestly they've been tyrannical and awful and deserve to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, especially with a lot of these cases coming out, and redirect our focus to just within our individual states, because we need to start looking at our state laws, because officers that are covered, a lot of times officers, most times in shootings, government is going to try to make sure that government covers its own butt. And so if they can justify the shoot in any way possible, they will justify the shoot. And we need to start looking at state laws to make sure that any shooting that happens, that these officers, if unjustified, need to be able to be prosecuted, be fired, and be prosecuted within our laws. And that we need to start looking at that in state laws, individual state laws. So, like, obviously, each police department is individual. Like, they run individually. So it's not like we can change a United States law, a law in Georgia, and expect it to it's going to be infiltrated differently in each police department. But we need to start making sure that that our state laws back our national laws. So if our state law in Georgia says that if there's an unjustified shooting, an officer will be fired and prosecuted, that backs up with the federal government. And so I think that we need to start making sure that when we're voting this year, and we're voting for our governors and for our mayors and for our Senate representatives, that we start making sure that these senators are trying to change laws within our state and also within our federal government, if that makes sense. And what's it like? Two police officers, not really. Never mind.
Going back to what you guys said about how different companies and stuff like that are putting out statements so that they're not chewed out by the public for not supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. What do you think of Georgia Southern's response to the Black Lives Matter movement?
So as far as I know I got a letter from the president basically talking about Georgia Southern's position. And then this interview that's going on in the but I mean, I feel like compared to other universities, we've kind of just been, average maybe. I know other universities are doing the same thing, like, they send out the letter and kids have opportunity to express how they feel. But I also think that there kind of needs to be more, I just kind of feel like it was just a response, like it wasn't genuine, like I kind of feel like it was a thing, like if you're a university, you need to put this out now too. You need to hold a position and you need to say what you represent and what you're standing for, because I mean, at that point in time, we're all like, okay, well, I'm going to this school and I'm a Black person. What do they think about this? So it would just have been more conflict that would have arisen if they didn't do it. But I feel like there needs to be a larger action step taken. Like, we need to have Black professors, people from Black universities come to our campus and speak. Like, we need to have more inclusive and representative conversations with each student as a whole.
And it just, for me, it gives that, it said, because I mean, I guess I just understand that the university does have restrictions, or like the president has restrictions on what he can say and what he can like officially say in a letter because of like the board of regents and all of that. But at the same time, I mean, I'm a junior, so I've been at Southern since 2017, and of course, it's like a copy and paste response from every incident. So of course, I'm pretty sure most of you remember the book burning incident last fall, and it's just it's kind of that copy and paste response of Georgia Southern doesn't allow this. We want to make sure we have diversity and inclusion in our school, and it's just that same response coming through that we don't stand for this. We don't want to do this, but at the same time not making change. And it's just with Southern, like I said, with Southern, you had, I mean, even though this directly didn't affect Georgia Southern, they still gave that same response that they did. And it's just with the triggerish incident, even though with the triggerish incident, they gave that same response of we don't allow racist incidents and everything. But of course, I mean, they're the first to raise their hand and, well, it's that person's free speech and First Amendment, so we cannot do anything, and they put that out there. And then of course with some professors saying the n-word in their classes, or even then, and of course the university not being able to do anything about it. And then of course with the book burnings, it's just that same response, over and over. And I feel like they definitely can do more. Like, okay, nobody really knows about, or like there's so little about Georgia Southern's like first African American students who came to the university. Why don't you why don't you maybe rename a building or erect a statue or something that shows that we are with our black students, or do something else rather than just giving us that same copied response that you have been giving us, and actually stand with us in solidarity rather than just saying, well, we stand with you guys, and just continuing on with daily business like it's nothing.
I think that honestly, I work with the OMA. I'm the president of the University of Peer Educators, and I think that we really do a lot. It's just we don't have a lot of promotion. Like it's not a lot of Black students don't know that there are areas where we can talk about police brutality. That we're making things like we had like last semester. We had one of the first 500 Black students, a person that was in that group actually came to do a Q&A and talk about his experience on campus and stuff like that. For I think it was February, actually. Like we have these rooms and it's available to students, but like you never hear about it, right? Like it's only you see a poster and like the school doesn't advertise it as big as it should be advertised. And I think that the OMA does really create these spaces. It's just we need to work on promotion more, and the school needs to work on promoting these spaces for African American students more than they do. And I think that we also do have to be careful between the difference between freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and you justifying my right to live or my right to be here. And
Letting it slide.
right, and I mean, like they do have to be careful because at some point, it's like almost they cross a very thin line between literally justifying whether or not Black lives are actually important or not, and then freedom of speech. And so I think it's hard for the university to play that line. I do think it's hard for them to try to play that line to be open to freedom of speech, and then at the same time be like, listen, people are allowed to have ideas. People are allowed to have thoughts. It's only when when your thoughts and ideas turn into actions against me that's when we start to have a problem. And so I think it's very hard for the school to play that line. And I do think that Georgia Southern has these spaces. It's just we just have to be able to promote them more. We have to be able to reach out to these freshmen, to upperclassmen, to be able to really share and promote these spaces.
Because a lot of times I know in surveys too, they'll ask, like, as an African American student or something like this, do you know about this resource or this resource? And a lot of time, more often than not, you'll say no because I've never heard about these resources, or they'll give it to you in a pamphlet and tell you this and tell you that, and then be done with it. That's it. And so it's not exactly like they tell you. It's not exactly like, hey, just want to let y'all know there's always a space here if you need it. Like, especially like with the Russell Union, they'll let you know that meditation space is there, but they won't let you know that the OMA office is there more times than not. They'll just tell you, oh yeah, that meditation space is there. If you want to rent out a room for your organization, you can come here and do this and do this. But oh, I want to go to OMA and talk about this or do this real quick. Oh, well, OMA is over there, and just like kind of as a second thought rather than behind what they actually want to say. And it's I mean, like you said, it becomes a problem when they ride that line of, well, this person has their freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech. But when it comes to, I mean, because like I said, yes, you burned a book, yes, you burned books and things like that, and they can say it's freedom of expression, freedom of speech. That's how they feel. But of course, when it comes to actually assaulting somebody on campus, or when it comes to like threatening somebody like that, that's when it will become not freedom of expression. It becomes, okay, this is dangerous now. We can't let you endanger the lives of our African American or personally our people of color on our campus. We can't let you endanger their lives because of how you feel.
And with the book burning incident, I don't think that was freedom of speech. I think that was purpose intimidation for minorities, for specifically I don't remember exactly which country she came from, but I know she was Hispanic or Latina. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was specifically intimidation towards people of color, because you're burning a book, you're being aggressive. I mean, people were walking out and yelling at her. And I have Latin American friends who were walking by and live in those dorms and felt extremely scared for their lives. And I think along with, I guess what am I trying to say? I guess I'm just extremely embarrassed by people like that and sorry for them. And it's just, for me, I guess it's so shocking how people can do things like that. I mean, I think the school's responses to these incidents are absolutely shitty. Their default response should not be First Amendment. I mean, these are targeting people. It's not First Amendment speech. To me personally, it seems like a hate crime, honestly. And I think that they should come out with a stronger response, because as they've shown, they come out with like a little slap on the wrist, and it's just going to keep happening over and over again until something actually, there's consequences for people's actions.
Because with that book burning, it showed it shed light on so many things that just happened. Because I mean, because one of my friends, her name is Elizabeth Malloy. She's the president of the Young Democrats of Georgia Southern. She was doing research. There had not been a recorded book burning in almost 18 years in this country until it happened until Georgia Southern had ours. And it's just like, and of course too, and it's like times of controversial unrest, you figure out and you see what people's true colors are and what their actual opinions are. And it's just like, wow, you really think this way. And it's just like, you really think this way, or you really feel this way or about these ideas. And of course, when it comes to like letting them know, like, this is endangering to my life or this person's life or these like people of color, and they don't care, that's when it becomes more of a problem. And like I said, you can't just have that same copy and paste response of, well, we certainly don't condone this, and we don't do this at all, and we don't let this happen. But at the same time, you keep saying that, you keep saying that, you keep saying that. And it's just like, y'all can't just keep saying that thinking everybody's going to let it go. First of all, a lot of students were still mad because the students that did the book burning went unpunished. And of course, they had no consequences happen to them. The school acknowledged that it was a racist incident, but of course, didn't really change anything. It was the same thing of, well, we're working to create more diversity and inclusion. We don't need diversity and inclusion. We need safety. I mean, like I said, like you said, Sadie, I know a good amount of people. I'm in the LGBT community as well as the African American community, and a lot of us, like even then, don't feel safe walking home or going to certain places because we don't know what might happen to us if we do. And it's just like, there are known places that may have a more disproportionate thing of white people or more disproportionate people of color, and it's if those kind of things mingle, it might not be good, or it depends. But at the same time, though, we cannot just let this slide by every time something like this happens. And this is just giving us that same response because they can only do so much. Okay, I get that you can only do so much, but at the same time, y'all can do more on your own campus. Just because they restrict you and they restrict on what you say in the letters, that doesn't mean you don't have the power to do it on your own campus. You don't have the things you can do. You can still do some things on your own campus. You can still take charge of your own university.
I think a lot of the departments on campus had a stronger statements put out versus the actual university and the president. Like I know the English department, the history department, and a good handful of other departments basically put out statements saying this is completely wrong. This is an awful racist incident. These students, something needs to happen. And I think it's sad and disappointing that the departments on campus and the professors feel more strongly about this than like the campus administrators and the president does.
Moving back into more of the recent killings, do you guys feel like the press is doing a great job at objectively reporting these incidents, especially like we talked about how Ahmaud Arbery, like it took 3 months for those footage to actually come out and then spark outrage, and now George Floyd, and then again Breonna Taylor, who has had basically almost none media coverage for her murder. What do you think the press is doing a good job of reporting these incidents?
Well, the press has never done a good job of reporting these incidents, so I wouldn't expect them to start doing that now. But I think it's very one-sided. I think they do not, of course, they don't show the police brutality that's actually going on during these protests in general. I mean, I saw one clip off of Fox News that the protesters were surrounding the police car, and that's the only clip that they showed on Fox News, when the entire clip, after like 30 seconds had passed by, the police in the police car began to run over the citizens. So, of course, I don't think it's getting the coverage that it deserves. I mean, it's sparking more conversation, so everybody is talking about it, but in no way do I think they're being completely objective to both sides, the police's side as well as the citizen side. I think it's I think it's a whole bunch of political stuff going on, honestly. I mean, that's all the news stations are, so.
Right. I feel like the media are only posting stories which they think they're going to get attention from. And the most outraged story of the week is the one they run with for about 2 weeks, and then it's gone all over the news. I mean, and if we can imagine, if these killings didn't have body camera footage or any camera footage, we would have never known what happened, and the media would have never covered it full national news. I think that almost every media site is either one side or the other, and it's very hard to find one that can just give you unopinionated facts about a lot of things. And I think the media is just doing a poor job. Like Kinsey said, like they've just done a poor job in general. I wouldn't expect them to do anything more than they do already.
It definitely feels so one-sided because more times than not, especially if you turn on a news station or if you look on a lot of the articles, more or not the videos will show the protesters, or it'll show looting. It'll show them looting and burning things, and it'll show them a lot more doing that than actually like walking and protesting and showing peaceful protest. It'll show them a lot of times. You might have a lot of pictures of them, but a lot of times when the news like puts on the 6 o'clock news or the 5 o'clock news, you'll see a lot of them like the protesting and the looting and them running around burning things, and because they want people to be like, well, looting is not right. They want to show y'all that, like they want to show people all of that. And then at the same time, but it's just like, well, these all start off as peaceful protests. And then, of course, like, you don't even get the citizen side. Like I said, you'll talk about the officer, you'll talk about what the officer did, you'll talk about what this person did. It was like, and then you might get one personal interview from a protester or something. But at the same time, you can't just let one side say it and not the other side speak. There were so many protesters out there you could have gotten interviews from, you could have said something from, you could have had so many people say something, but you just want to show, oh, these protesters are rioting and looting and burning and they're doing this, they're destroying the country you love so much. And that's why a lot of people are so focused on the looting and the outrage rather than the actual problem, because the news and the media is showing, well, this is this and this is what's going on, this is what y'all see, but a lot of this is uncovered, which is the peaceful protest. Oh, we want to do, or it's like they're sitting there, they're protesting, they're saying the chants, and they only show you small clips of it because they want you to see the looting and they want you to get outraged that these people are burning your city or something like that. And it's just, it's so very one-sided and so biased because they want they want the people at home to be outraged and they want them to like stop it. And it's just, it's not what it's showing.
They're, by showing all the protests, it's sensational, but they're also just catering to ignorant white society, because that's really, they don't, I guess for me, I understand why people are rioting and looting. I mean, even since the 60s and before in the civil rights movement, peaceful protesting and all this stuff, I mean, this has been going on for a super long time. And at what point in time does even peaceful protesting stop working? And eventually you have to kind of get the attention of people. And if grinding cities to a halt is what it takes to grab the attention of people, to get those in charge to pay more attention, then I'm for it, honestly. But with them, it's definitely one-sided. They just show what's sensational on both sides. But that doesn't really get, they don't get the protesters on the ground's point of view. They don't explain, like, why rioting and looting has happened. Why are people so pissed off? They don't explain that, which I think is important because, like I said, this has been going on for like ever since slavery. I mean, Black people and people of color have been fighting for their rights and to be seen as human beings for like the longest time. And it's understandable that people eventually get upset about this. I mean, the fact that even today, in what we consider ourselves to be a modern society, we're incapable of seeing another human being as a human being just because of the color of their skin. And I mean, it's all back like we're in the 1800s or something. And it's just, it blows my mind that this is the point where we're at, like, today in a modern world.
Usually there's a difference in coverage and how Black men versus Black women face police brutality. And this can also go for like Black trans people as well.
You have barely seen anything in the news for Black trans people getting killed.
Yeah.
Getting killed. I think that's Black trans lives is a whole different conversation that's not even ready to be had yet. I think right now, they're still valid, they're still important, obviously, but we're not talking about it. And right now, I think the Black community is so unified that at some point, like, I really feel like we're so unified right now that everyone's in the bunch. Everyone's in the bunch. So if you're covering Black men, Black women, Black trans lives, whatever, we're all part of the Black community and we're all hurting right now. And so I feel like even though we're not getting talked about as much, I think that it's still there and the Black community is still very unified right now. And if you're talking about Black men, you're talking about Black trans men. If you're talking about Black women, you're talking about Black trans women as well. And so I think right now that even though, one's not getting as vocalized as the other, we as a community, you're talking about all of us. And it's important that every single situation, every single shooting or killing that has happened, they're Black. And that's enough. Regardless of their sex or sexual orientation, that is enough to spark any type of movement.
It makes a lot of, I mean, it just makes so much sense because I mean, especially with, I mean, the coverage of talking about black men and black women is just like, a lot of times you definitely want to face that stereotype of the angry black man, the angry black woman. We want to face and um just get rid of that stereotype. I mean, because we see that coverage and more times than not, like especially we see that stereotype in a lot of things. We see it in TV, we see it we see it here. It's just like, I mean, it's not a thing. And like, um personally for me, like a lot of women in my family, sometimes they don't get upset because they'd rather not be labeled in public as that angry black woman that was screaming at the cashier. They'd rather not be labeled as something like that, but the media will cover that or say, well, this woman got mad and everything. Well, she was black and she got mad at this person. And then more often than not, you'll see a video or you'll see the thing of the stereotype, the angry black woman just screaming or the angry black man. And it's just like we have to, I mean, but like Alex said, we're so unified right now that it's just we're all together right now. We're all coming together and we can't, and like I said, if you're talking about one of us or if you're talking about a certain group of us, you're basically talking about all of us because we are all unified by our skin color. And so when when it happens, I mean, we all have to come together because there's no time for division in this community. I mean, yes, you might not agree with some things or you might not agree with other things, but at the same time, though, we all still have the same skin color. We all come from a similar root or similar area. There are different things that might come into play, but we're all still unified. So we don't have time for division between this and this and this and this right now in our own community. We coming together right now for the one common thing, which is we want our own human rights. We don't need to fight each other when we're all just fighting and for our basic human right to live and not be killed for nothing.
Any other comments? How do you feel about the president's response to the recent killings, along with the movement?
Has he ever not disappointed someone? Like, I mean, what are we expecting him to say that is so life changing that we're somehow going to change our opinions about him? Like, it's not. Like, the black community did not expect any help, anything from him to begin with, and the fact that he has been virtually silent about a lot of this stuff and has tried to stand with us, but has utterly backtracked and failed. I mean, what did we expect, honestly, from him? And if he doesn't get voted out, honestly, in November, then we really want that up to begin with. Honestly,
I mean, it's such a. I don't even know what to say anymore because I can't even with him. I just don't even know what to say anymore because it's so. What makes me mad is his callous response to a lot of things, and it's just, I mean, the hypocrisy of it, the hypocrisy, the like just blunt responses that you can see his opinion. I mean, a lot of people already could see and know he had problems earlier on from the beginning. But on the other hand, too, you people purposely saw from his Twitter what he was saying. People purposely saw he was in stance with the people trying to fight against a pandemic or biological warfare. He was in stance with them. He was saying, help them get their lives back, help them make sure they can do this. But when we come together to get universal and reform and to societal change, then he immediately calls us thugs. He calls us thugs, or he says, if they start looting, we start shooting. You're the president of the United States of America. You're basically an ambassador and represent this country in the face of other countries. And you're saying this to your own people. And it's unbelievable with some of the things he says and just the things he does, because you can tell, like, just from what he says or what he does, he's such you can see the position he is at, and there is no way he ever will stand with the Black community. There is no way he will ever do anything that will benefit or help the Black community. The only thing he's tried to do things, but it still didn't benefit all of us as a people. It just made him look better in the eyes of the people who like follow him or the people who voted for him. It just made him look better in their eyes. It didn't make anything better for the actual people. It just made him look better. But at this point, I just want him to get out of office. And of course, a lot of times too, with the people who voted for him and like just the people who follow him and think he's actually doing well, I want them to see what he's actually done and the consequences of what he has done and what he has said. Because it's not just he said something callous and everybody got mad at him. No, he's done things that have hurt and harmed people. He's done or said things that have made people rethink their position. And it's just like they need to see the actions and need to see the consequences of what this man has done. And I'm just really, of course, I'm hoping and I know a lot of people will stand out too to get him out in November, because he does not deserve and he does not need to be back in any type of, excuse me, he does not need to be back in any type of power or any type of position that can change things.
I agree with what Alex said, that like I didn't really expect him to say anything that would be beneficial, because clearly he does not have a track record of being helpful or anything like that at all. Frankly, I think when he speaks, he lowers the IQ of everyone who hears him. And I think that the fact that he got elected, because a lot of his stances were run on racist ideas towards immigrants. And I think that the fact that he got elected shows just how deep-rooted racism is in America. So I guess I never really expected him. I think it's sad to say that the comments that he said is kind of what I expected from him, just because I think he's kind of a terrible human being, and those are the things that I think a terrible human being would say.
Yeah. And it just shows with a lot of the things that he does and he says, he has no moral or ethical like sense. He just says what he wants to say and he thinks there's no consequences to those actions. And well, he's the president, he doesn't have to hold back his tongue or something like that. No, yes, he does. The things he says and things he does do have an impact on this country. I mean, not even people forget, but it's just not long after he was elected, there was a whole rally of the KKK in Charlottesville. And it's just it's different things like that he could say or do one thing and it affects somebody somewhere, and it creates hatred and evilness. And it's not a good thing that he can be empowered, that he can say these things and they won't, and he thinks they have no impact, or he's saying them and people just believe him and follow him. And of course he doesn't see the people who follow him have these ideals that, well, we don't want these immigrants or these people of color in our country. We don't want this to happen. We don't want that to happen. Really? And it's just like, he does. I mean, you can't even, it's like half the time, it's like I said, I don't even expect him to say something that is smart, or at least that shows that he has a shred of common sense. It's just more of, all right, what you can't even fathom half of the things he says half the time, just because you're just like, oh, well, he does this. And then when people are like, well, you actually listen to him and actually hear his positions, we have heard him. We've heard a lot of things, and it's still not good. I don't know what you guys follow, and I'm not even gonna try to go into that, but still, like, have you even heard of what he's trying to say or what he's trying to do? He resonates with you, but a lot of other people, he doesn't resonate with us. So that's why we don't like him. And and his outrageous behavior and the things he says and does just make it so much worse, especially when he can just say anything. And like I said, because I mean, it still shocked me that he called most African Americans to protest, and he called them thugs. It shocked me that he would even say something like it. And I mean, it didn't even shock me, but it was just like it shocked me on how little restriction he had, and the fact that nobody in the administration and nobody in that whole place was just like, hey, that's not a good thing for you to say, that's wrong, or something like that. And it just shows that that whole administration, they're not even scared of him, because of course he can't do anything. They're not even scared, but it shows that they believe in those same ideals, and a lot of them are just like willing to take it and willing to just run with it. And that's not the case. That is not what we're trying to portray here. And it's just he's making America look more like a laughing stock every day. And it's just other countries who are like, America's been fighting for freedom and have seen the things we've gone through, they're just looking at us now like, huh, you enjoying that freedom? Are you guys enjoying what you see right now? Because wow, this is like, y'all are really just enjoying it. Seems like y'all are really enjoying this freedom thing and having your own democracy. And it's just like, it's like we all go 10 steps forward just to him to pull us like 12 to 15 steps back just from one thing he says alone.
I definitely feel like his response represented his voters. So I just feel like that's how people have been feeling how some people feel all their lives. They're just not in a position to really like say something about it to where a large group would actually pay attention. So they use who they vote for to portray their ideals that they know wouldn't be accepted in modern society right now. I don't expect anything of him. I think he is an awful president. And come November, there will be change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's still, there's so many things that can just happen. And like I said, with him, it's just, I mean, the fact that he has no ethical or moral like sense. I mean, he tried to reverse the Transgender Health Protection Act on the day of the Pulse nightclub shooting, on the anniversary. He tried to reverse the rights, and it's just like, how immoral do you have to be to do something like that? Or even then, it's just like, how callous do you have to be to just, oh, it's okay, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and it's just like, it, it's not even accepted anymore. And yeah, a lot of people follow you, but at the same time, there's a lot of people in this country who don't follow you and don't like you, and they want you to get out. So definitely by November, you will see there's definitely going to be a change, or there's going to be something that goes on to try to get this man out of office.
I'm going to leave you guys with a final question. This is going to be like just a very broad one, but what has this movement like taught you, and do you actually think there will be actual change?
So what do you mean this moment? You mean like us speaking right now, or do you mean like the Black Lives Matter movement, or?
Okay, that's what I said. What has this movement like taught you, and do you actually believe change will happen, like in the long?
I think this movement, oh my goodness, this movement has taught me that it's more than a movement. It's not just a let's spark up protests and let's be passionate about Black Lives Matter consistently for 2 weeks. It's about implementing changes in your life every day that contribute to the inspiring and educating people about the Black Lives Matter movement and encouraging people to talk about it and be uncomfortable with their feelings. And it's something that as a people we have to keep fighting for. It's not something that's just going to stop. It's not going to change overnight. We already know that because nothing happens overnight. It's something that you have to continuously work towards. You have to be consistent in your movement in order to see really anything changing in your life. So it's just taught me that consistency is really the key to any change in your life. You need to have consistency throughout your entire life to have a balanced life, honestly. And I do think that things are gonna change. Change comes with time, and nothing happens overnight. So we just have to take our time, go to the polls and vote, and keep educating ourselves on this topic so we can create real change.
It's definitely taught me that this movement has taught me so much that um, a lot of people can come together for one movement. It's not just certain people that are always standing, or it's not like just a small group of people. This movement has sparked so much outrage in, like I said, countries all over the world and just in different places. And like everybody comes together for one movement. And it's taught me that like I mean, we already knew systemic racism was in place and there was a lot of oppression, but I mean, it taught me too that the system really is, I mean, that the system is really against us as a people, because I mean, we're hearing now a lot of times, more often than not, we're hearing about parts of history that are forgotten, where where a similar incident has happened, or where something has changed. I mean, because especially in like schools or something like that, they don't teach you more about like the Tulsa race massacre, or they don't teach you about certain parts of history that we as African Americans need to know. And it's just, I mean, they teach us, but it's like we don't know about it until somebody tells us, oh yeah, this happened before. And of course, history, if we don't learn from it, of course we're always doomed to repeat it if we don't learn. And so it's just, when we learn about it, we definitely want to make change from it, and we want to change change the system we have, so we can live, and so we don't see those same events happening, so we don't see those same things going on. And we want to educate ourselves to be better, to see more than just this, to see more than just what we have been taught before. And it's just a lot of, I mean, it will bring about change. I mean, it had, I mean, this movement will definitely bring out something, and even then it will still go down in history as one of the biggest movements for Black lives and for African American people. It will go down as one of the biggest movements that have gone down in history itself. And it's just, it will bring change to this country, and not even just this country, but to even other countries who have still been impacted by this same issue as well. It will bring a change to a lot of them, just more than one thing. And it's kind of like a ripple effect, that if it changes here, it'll change here, and it'll change here, and it'll grow bigger to the point where it grows big enough. And I mean, it's just, it's such, I'm amazed and humbled to be part of something that will change the future of generations below us, our kids, and just people around the world.
I think that this movement has taught me is that there's really people out there that are just saying no, and that there are people out there that, there's a difference between you disagreeing with me on politics and about policy, and you disagreeing with me about whether or not Black lives actually matter or they don't matter. And I think it has definitely brought out the worst in a lot of people, and I think it's brought out the best with people within the movement. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the next few weeks and within the next 2 to 5 years. I think it's going to be really interesting to see like what change we do bring about, and if that change has actually done something, and if that change is actually what we need. And I think it's going to be interesting just to see how everything plays out. But it's definitely taught me that like you know people really disagree with you about whether or not you matter, and that's interesting and disgusting to say the least. And so I think that everyone just needs to keep the consistency, like Kenzie said, and keep the drive and keep the passion and realize that like you know change does happen over time and it will happen. We just have to make sure that it does.
I think it's taught me that I think it's the movement's taught me a lot of things. Obviously, I understand that I have white privilege because of my skin color. And I think it's taught me that white society has become complacent in allowing our fellow human beings to be treated like utter shit by other human beings. And I really hope that while we go out there and we continue to protest, that it keeps going. Because I know in years past, there's been protest after a shooting, and it seems like it dies out. And then it seems like you never hear about it, like, again. But what I guess I really hope for the future of this is that we keep going until change happens. Like, keep it at the forefront of people's minds until something actually results of it. Because if we don't, it's just another protest, and then it's going to dwindle out until the next shooting. And I think that we should be able to try to prevent the next shooting and just keep putting it at the forefront of people's minds and keep protesting until change actually happens, and to not give up and don't become complacent.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. I truly appreciate it because I feel like this is something that needs to be discussed, especially on our campus. So thank you so much for being a part of this.